Hot off the reveal of Xbox Series X specifications, we are back to discuss more. This time, however, we're looking at Gears 5. The Coalition was nice enough to join us in Redmond to showcase some updates they've made to the game since shipping it last year. This time, that means a bunch of new enhanced settings and things pushed up to the max to really showcase what the system can do, and everything here was done in just 2 weeks. And to discuss that, I have of course brought along my good buddy, Alex Battaglia, who has a lot of experience with the PC version of the game, which is very relevant in this case, isn't it?
Yeah, it's basically, well, I thought last year was one of my favorite PC versions of a game. Had a lot of customization, but a big point was that you could push it up to levels that you really didn't see on console. And a lot of it was iterative differences, like higher resolution volumetric settings, higher resolution shadows, kind of higher resolution textures. But there was also some other areas where it would really add a lot to the image based upon like distance settings. So you could have level of detail for geometry, but be pushed way out into the distance in comparison to Xbox One X or Xbox One S, or shadows being pushed out to the distance so they wouldn't disappear really close in front of the camera. Or things like screen space reflections applying to more surfaces so that you would see reflections more realistically in the environment. And all these like iterative things and also some of these larger things made a really different looking image in the end. And I thought the PC version looked a cut above what I was seeing on Xbox One X. And basically that's what we're seeing here on the Series X.
And yeah, of course, that definitely requires more hardware.
Yes.
As we can see from their excellent benchmarking tool, which kind of showcases that cranking up everything to Ultra does require a very beefy PC.
Indeed, it does. Later gen Turing or a very high end like Radeon 7 for 4K, you're looking at a very heavy game.
So for this video then, we have a video here showcasing the game running on Xbox Series X. So this is all direct capture, and we're going to kind of run through the demo here and take a look at some of the different changes and improvements that have been made to this demo. And like I said, this was all done in just 2 weeks. So the Coalition pushed this demo together rather quickly. It's still kind of in a rough state, so to speak, yet you'd almost never guess based on what we're about to see. So
yeah, right.
let's go ahead and kick things off right now. So one of the first things I guess you can see right away here is that the loading times are massively cut down thanks to the new NVMe drive in the system.
This is a really big deal because it's always been a problem on like this current generation of hardware, even on the Xbox One X, where the 5400 RPM drive and the, I would say, lower CPU cores cannot really load things very quickly. And this demo, though, is not using the direct storage API, so it's actually would probably be loading in a more native port. But this 2 weeks, obviously, this is just the raw speed of the SSD.
Yeah, which is pretty impressive. And then obviously beyond that right away, you see the cutscenes here operate at 60 frames per second, which was also possible on the PC version, but on Xbox One X, all cutscenes were rendered at 30 FPS.
Totally expensive thing to do because these models in the cutscene with like the big bokeh depth of field up close shots, it's really expensive to push these cutscenes up to 60 FPS on PC. And to do that on PC, and I imagine this demo is doing here as well, too, is you have to utilize the kind of the dynamic resolution scaling in the game, which worked really, really well, and it's obviously going to work just as well, if not better, on Xbox Series X.
That's right. And also, while we're here in the cutscenes, if you kind of stop and look at the armor in certain sequences, you can kind of see that they are using the high-res texture pack, which does, it's not like a world of difference, but there's definitely more finesse and detail in the armor, more scratches and other visible blemishes along its surface that really do look nice.
For the close-ups, it's really good in cutscenes. It's not like they were horrible looking or something on Xbox One X, but in the cutscenes, it really helps to have that extra level of detail instead of seeing like an edge from a texture's lower resolution.
Yeah, and so if you go ahead a little bit here, we kind of see when the game switches from cutscene over to real-time gameplay, the transition is rather seamless now because, the game is 60, the cutscenes are 60, whereas on Xbox, there is kind of that moment where it switches, and it can be a little bit jarring.
I mean, it's sometimes necessary to get the cutscenes looking as good as they are in games, but the fact that this is just unlocked now, that makes that you don't even think about you're switching between gameplay and a cutscene.
Exactly.
And one of the cool things is when you're actually looking above, I remember from the PC version right here, and you can also see on Series X, that the draw distance when looking down into this pit from the helicopter is pushed way further on PC Ultra, which Xbox Series X is running here. So you can always, there's not any of that pop in as he's moving down on the rope.
And not only that, so yeah, the draw distance on all the scenery detail has been increased, but they also added screen space shadows.
Yes.
So you kind of get those close-up high fidelity shadows on some objects that I don't think that was even included in the original game. So it's like a new feature that they've implemented in this build.
It was curious. It was like in Gears 4 on select things, I think.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
But and it was not in Gears 5, but they added it in for this demo on Xbox Series X. So any of those areas where you would maybe see the shadow not aligning correctly with the object, or smaller things like detail on someone's face, it will now have a screen space shadow.
Yeah, and then also this room is good. You know, they actually added SSR in more areas, like you can see it there.
Like on PC, as you would go down the settings down from Ultra, it would reduce the amount of SSR that was put on screen by saying objects that are more dull or matte do not get screen space reflections.
That's right. So only the most reflective objects had SSR, and here they sort of expanded it out, so you just see it more across, evenly sort of used across the environment. So yeah, I mean, thus far, you know, it's a lot of those typical things, but so obviously there's a lot of volumetric lighting and volumetric fog in this game, and they were able to increase, I guess, both the density and resolution of the sort of grid, but also it's just more accurate and precise. So the way it sort of fills in and around objects is more in line with how light would actually work. Whereas on Xbox One X, it's a little bit more general, so it just kind of floods through an area.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not picking up the shadow as much on Xbox One X. And it's lower resolution also in certain scenes in the original game would make it fizzle a little bit, which obviously on the Ultra settings that PC offered would drastically reduce that.
And then I guess one of the biggest features that they've added here is the screen space global illumination that was in recent versions of Unreal Engine 4.
Yeah, this is very similar to that kind of ray-traced global illumination added in via Reshade that a lot of people have been talking about and that we covered extensively last year through multiple videos. Since it is a post-process, essentially, it applies to any and every surface that is in screen space. So anything that is accepting light will bounce it as well, too. And so like when that flashlight is moving around here, it's obviously a bit hard to tell without a direct one-to-one comparison, but there's a lot of extra light being added in from that flat flashlight that's being bounced around here. And a big part of that too is the extra kind of like occlusion that it will add in, because as I understand it, they turned off SSAO in this build of the game on Series X and replaced it completely with screen space global illumination, which will have, by necessity, it'll also add in screen space shadows from that GI, is what we're seeing here. So there is no SSAO here. It's all kind of SSGI.
And it works really well, actually. It's a really nice solution that's a little bit more, I guess, performant.
Yeah, than straight up ray tracing.
Exactly. So I was initially a little bit, I wanted to see real ray tracing utilized in this game, but, as a game that had already shipped and was designed with a specific look in mind, this actually makes a lot of sense to implement a feature like this.
Yeah, it's going to affect the whole screen, but at the same time, they don't have to develop the art for the entire game, which was developed around, like a static bounce lighting primarily.
Exactly. In the darker scenes, it's especially obviously with the flashlight bouncing around, but even outdoors, it just has a richer, more accurate look. Shadows and everything just sort of appear more naturally shaded now in areas that are possibly overly bright in the original version. Now are more accurate.
There'll be like areas like the underside of something where it's kind of like the static lighting was a bit too low res. And the dynamic SSAO wouldn't actually catch that, and this will actually shade it dark now, like it should, like the underside of things.
Yeah, exactly. There's that one ledge, especially in here, that you should probably show up there, which is it's extremely obvious in terms of the original solution, just completely missing it because the resolution wasn't high enough to handle it. The precision wasn't there.
A big thing too is, since it is, be sampling the color in screen space, like all this little like greenery here too will have subtle bounces of green into the shadowed light there. Instead of like SSAO, which will just be a black color no matter what.
It's just black. That's right. So you get some proper light bounce.
That reminds me a lot of like the differences we'll see on PC with ray trace GI, but obviously with the caveat that it is in screen space. So it will disappear. Like, this technique is really good, but if you're using it exclusively for relighting your scene, it could fall apart. But since this game already has the baked lighting, it's another layer on top of that to refine it and also cover dynamic objects much better.
Exactly, and this game doesn't really need fully dynamic world lighting. It's arted up in a very specific way, very specific times of day, and that's already all been decided and determined for the shipping game. So, adding in these extra layers, as we've seen in our own tests with the similar reshade feature, can actually add some nice enhancements to the game. And I do think it's nice to see implemented in Unreal Engine 4 at an engine level. I don't think any other game has shipped with this feature yet.
There's one game on PC, Path of Exile, uses it.
Oh, Path of Exile uses it. Wow, okay.
Yeah, because it works really well for them because it's a 2.5D game. So you're not going to be able to see the places where it has problems usually. It's really good for like any style of Diablo style game.
We got to see all these changes and it looks absolutely excellent. But there was one other thing. Like, after they presented the demo to us, we actually got a chance, and unfortunately we don't have the assets to show here, but we got to see directly how it compares to both Xbox One X and the PC running the fixed benchmark. This is super fascinating, isn't it?
Basically, they showed the game running on Xbox One X at 4K at its settings, which are kind of like a mishmash of like medium, high, and slightly lower for some things, without any dynamic resolution scaling, and running through the game's benchmark essentially. And there it ran kind of not as well.
There's no dynamic resolution scaling. And the benchmark itself is rather heavy, so it kind of shows you the raw performance results. And again, like you said, this is with Xbox One X settings. Now, obviously for Series X, they ramped that up to both Ultra, but also beyond. But for the benchmark, they just ran it in full Ultra mode.
Yeah, with none of those extra settings like SSGI or Can't Talk Shadows.
And they compared it directly to a PC with an RTX 2080 and a Threadripper 2950X. So that's a 16-core CPU. And this thing had 64 gigs of memory as well in it. Basically, what the benchmark shows us with that PC running the exact same settings as Xbox Series X, with a fixed resolution, without dynamic resolution, of course, they produce nearly identical results. Now, the PC still has some slight advantages, especially the CPU is still a little bit ahead if you look at the graph. But again, this is just 2 weeks of work, and then basically what we have is performance on par with an RTX 2080.
And the best part is this is just 2 weeks old code, essentially a very raw port. If it were to take advantage of a lot of things that Turing has or that the Xbox Series X has with like mesh shaders and variable rate shading and all these other things, it could actually be running this game much faster.
And that's interesting because while we didn't actually get to see it in a demo, they did say that they are working towards updating the multiplayer to run at 120 frames per second.
Amazing. That's so good.
So yeah, I mean, that's kind of the state of things. It was, a very early demonstration of the game. And I guess the idea was to show us what kinds of things can be done for already shipped games. So obviously this is a game that supports Xbox One X. They're enhancing it, and just as we saw with X, it'll be released basically as a patch to allow existing owners to play it with these new enhanced settings. And hey, they still have a long time before they need to finish the patch, so who knows what we'll see by the time it ships. Either way, it's promising. It kind of shows where the spec of the machine falls, and yeah, it's still a great looking game.
Yeah.
But I guess that's going to do it for this video, so thanks for joining me, Alex.
Of course, Sean.
And as always, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe, ring the notification bell for instant updates from Digital Foundry, and come find us on Twitter to discuss anything you want, I suppose, especially if it's video games and tech related. And until next time, this is John signing off, and
Alex saying Auf Wiedersehen.